Hey you guys, what's up? My name is Morgan Bilberry, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite books in the Bible, the book of Ruth. We're going to talk about who exactly Ruth is and why she's important to the Jewish religion. We're going to do a brief overview of the book of Ruth, and we're going to look into the book's relationship to literature written around the same time. First things first, who is Ruth? Well, Ruth was a Moabite princess who also was virtuous and very selfless. She did not agree with the ideology of her people, so when the chance arose, she happily gave up everything she knew and her title and accepted a life of poverty amongst her people whom she admired. Due to the famine in Israel, a Judean man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi and their two sons moved to Moab in search of better job opportunities and more food. Ruth befriended the Jewish family and came to admire their customs and laws, and when one of the sons asked her to marry him, she eagerly accepted. She never regretted her decision to leave behind the comfort in her title. All she saw was selfishness and mercilessness. So, why is Ruth important to the Jewish religion? Well, Ruth is the grandmother of King David, the second king of ancient Israel, who founded the Judean dynasty and united all the tribes of Israel under one single monarch. King David was the father of Solomon, who was the third king of Israel. He ushered in an era of peace and prosperity for his people, and he is famous for building the first holy temple in Jerusalem. The story of Ruth and Naomi is a story in which I personally find very interesting and inspiring. This by far is not the entirety of the story of the two women, but this is up until Ruth meets Boaz. When Elimelech and his two sons passed away, Ruth, her mother-in-law Naomi, and her sister-in-law Orpah were left poor and widowed. Naomi told Ruth and Orpah to leave her and return to their families so that they could be cared for. Ruth and Orpah refused. However, Orpah eventually gave in and returned to her family like Naomi requested. Ruth was adamant in her determination to follow her mother-in-law and to cling to the faith of her adoption, which she became so dear. The future was to prove that Ruth would be justly rewarded for her high resolve, but even in her poverty, Ruth had absolutely no regrets about her decision. So this is when Ruth meets Boaz. By the time the two women arrived in Judah, it was time for the harvest, and Ruth went to the field to see if she could get some food for them. She ran into the owner of the land, Boaz, and he gave her some food and sent her on her way. She told her mother-in-law Naomi about the man she had met, and Naomi explained to her that the man she had met was the family redeemer, meaning that if a woman in the family was left a widow, it was his job to marry her and take care of her and her children if she had any. The two women came up with a plan to get Boaz to agree to redeem Ruth. The next day, Ruth waited for Boaz to lay down on the threshing floor and for him to fall asleep. After he fell asleep, she went up to him, uncovered his feet, and laid down. He woke up and asked her who she was, and she said, "I am your servant Ruth. Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are the guardian redeemer of our family." He commended her for her loyalty to her mother-in-law and told her that there was someone else in line before him, but if that man would not redeem her, then he would. The other man refused to redeem her due to her being a Moabite woman, and redeeming her would harm his inheritance. Boaz redeemed Ruth in front of the town elders, and together Ruth and Boaz had a son named Obed. Okay, so for the next few slides, we're going to look at how the book of Ruth compares to other literature written in the same time. Namely, we're going to be looking at how the book of Ruth compares to the book of Judges. The book of Ruth provides a contrast to the last two narratives of the book of Judges. At the end of Judges, we are left thinking that the nation is in a complete state of chaos, with absolutely no moral compass or sense of what is right and what is wrong. Ruth, however, gives us a completely different view of that era, one that is peaceful and people help each other out in times of need. At the end of the book of Judges, people are engaging in activities that lead to theft, murder, rape, and ultimately civil war. In the book of Ruth, however, people perform many of the same acts morally and virtuously, looking beyond the surface of Ruth as a foreigner and recognizing the goodness within her. Now for a few thematic connections. Although many of the actions performed by the Israelites in Judges are good and moral in their eyes, they are in fact wicked and perverse, as they are ultimately murdering people, raping people, and ultimately their actions lead to a civil war. These actions are again performed morally and virtuously in Ruth. They include invoking God's name in a blessing, offering hospitality, and attempting to save a lost part of the house of Israel. So, what are the two major differences between the book of Ruth and the book of Judges? Well, the book of Judges tells a gloomy story of social chaos, disobedience to God, oppression, deliverance, and apostasy. Ruth tells a beautiful story of devotion, love, faithfulness during all of this. So, real quick, I want to talk about the family tree of Ruth and Boaz. So, Ruth and Boaz had their son Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse. Jesse had a son named David. David had a son named Solomon. And as we keep going on and on and on, we get to Jesus. So we can see how Ruth and Boaz are kin to major people in the Jewish religion and also to Jesus, who was a major part in Christianity. So lastly, I wanted to do a personal reflection real quick. For me personally, the book of Ruth is inspiring because Ruth gave up everything she had in pursuit of what she wanted, a place where she could be herself and do what she wanted to do. I think we could all learn a lesson from Ruth. For me, that lesson is, even though it's what you grew up with and it's what you know, it's not what you have to stay with. You don't have to stay that way and continue to do those things. You should always chase your dreams and do what makes you happy.